Whoa, hello everyone. Let me try and find Bill on here. He's here, but he keeps getting bumped down.
Unmuted.
There we go. There we go. Hope everyone is doing well today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate everybody coming on today. Bill, how's your day going, man?
Awesome. Busy.
Yeah. Busy?
Of course.
Yeah?
I always have stuff to do.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Oh,
I mean, I say busy, but my version of busy is like, oh, I'm really hungry. Will you make me some food? Or
exactly.
dog needs to go on a walk. It's just like a different version of busy, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Right. Exactly right.
So I've used Zoom a lot, but I have never run a meeting like this. So I'm just trying to admit everybody as they come on. So,
Yes. So Zoom upgraded rather substantially in the last 2 weeks.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Can't imagine why.
well, the hackers.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So that's why you have to invite everybody in now.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Scooby-Doo comic that I posted?
I have not seen it yet. No.
It's like in Scooby-Doo, they always like solve a case, right? So Fred, well, my kids are into Scooby-Doo now, which is funny because I was into it. But anyway, so Fred is like, let's see who's behind this COVID-19. And it's like a masked character, and they lift it up, and it's Zoom. It's
Gotcha.
the Zoom logo.
I have seen that.
Yeah. So anyway.
I think they're doing okay.
Yeah, no, I think they're probably doing just fine right now. Well, let's get rolling a little bit, man. And just, I think we've got a loose group of topics that we wanted to chat about today, and then we can open it up for Q&A at the end, and anybody that has questions can answer them then, okay?
Cool.
So let's start with, because I know people want to know the answer to this, or they want to discuss this to some degree. They want to know what our initial response was when all this hit, and maybe how we are going to change things on the back end of this, right? Because it's not like May 1 hits, and I'm assuming it's going to be May 1 for us, but it's not like May 1 hits and it's back to business as usual, right? So let's start with our initial thought process, what we wanted to do, how we then had to pivot, and then kind of our thought process on the back end of this. And I'm happy to take some of this too, so don't feel like you have to answer it all.
Well, why don't you just lead? Because you can talk about the gym first, and then
Okay.
I can talk about the other side of things.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. So when all this first started going down, our initial thought process was we're just going to decrease our social footprint, right? Trying to follow the concepts of social distancing that we had in play. So our initial thought process was, okay, we're going to get rid of open gym, which is, I mean, it's not necessarily an income driver, but it's included in memberships, and certain members definitely use it more than others. So our first thought process was we're going to limit or minimize altogether open gym memberships. We're only going to allow semi-privates in. Basically, if you're not training a client as a staff member, you're not to be in the gym. You need to be somewhere else. And then even limiting our boot camp sessions, either altogether or making a sign-up list to where we just don't offer that. So we had this great game plan going into, I think it was, I don't know, end of March. And literally as we sat in staff meeting that day, that's when Governor Holcomb told us, oh, sorry, we're shutting everything down for 2 weeks. So at that point in time, that's when we pivoted and basically moved everything online for a window of time and tried to get as many of our clients and athletes engaged with us via Zoom as possible. Wasn't the ideal. Obviously, I don't care what anybody tells you. It's not the same. But at that point, you're really trying to manage the situation as best as possible and manage the relationships. I think that was the thing for us. We wanted to manage our relationships. We wanted to stay in front of as many of our members as possible so that when this was over, we didn't have mass exodus. Because I think that's what I don't hear enough people talking about. There's a lot of people talking about, what do I do right now in this moment? But yeah, you have to worry about what's happening now in this moment, but you also have to think about, hey, when this is all said and done, I don't want to lose half my business permanently, because that's when you have bigger issues. So that was our initial thought. Obviously, we pivoted. We moved into the Zoom realm. When we got the national mandate to stay closed until the 30th, what we decided to do, and this was what was best for us, we just paused all memberships. We literally reached out to all of our members on an individual basis. Anybody that wanted to stay on via the virtual trainings on Zoom was welcome to do that. Anybody that didn't want to do that, we suspended all payments in April, and we just let them know that we fully expect to be open on May 1. When that happens, billing's going to resume. It's back to business as usual. Again, I think the caveat's going to have to be in place because you don't just go back to business on May 1, but we're going to have to go back to, hey, semi-private and scheduled trainings only for a period of time. Kind of what I've thought of in my head is maybe from like 12 to 3, we have a dead time where we don't really have clients coming into the gym. So we can maybe keep our 12 o'clock boot camp session, again, as long as we minimize the numbers in that. And then 1 and 2 o'clock, we open that up for open gym members. They'll probably have to book or schedule in some way, but that's kind of my thought process right now. But anyway, that's what we're doing. Bill, would you mind sharing kind of your process with regards to PT? And then I think that would be a good time we can move it into from there. We can talk about the assessment process and how you can continue to kind of onboard new clients or new potential members during this time.
Right. So physical therapy presents a little bit of a different case because it falls under the medical category. And Homeland Security sent out a list of essential services. And so physical therapy landed under that category. So I was actually able to stay open a little bit longer. But here's what happens, is that everybody's following the guidelines. And so the number of patient visits per week starts to drop off rather precipitously. And so then everybody goes to virtual. And so not everybody wanted to do a virtual. So I have people that are scheduled after our return already. And so we just decided that the patient load was dropping so significantly that we were just going to protect everybody the best that we possibly could. We had trouble actually fulfilling the protective guidelines because of the type of therapy that we do on an outpatient basis. It's just too difficult to stick to the extreme of the protective guidelines. So I'll give you, for instance, so my wife is a nurse. She does outpatient surgery prep and recovery, and she is now required to have the full garb, face screen, N95 mask, et cetera, et cetera. There's no way I can keep up with that. So we just shut it down. So basically IFAST is currently a ghost town, basically until the beginning of next month. And again, so basically it's just a matter of the current environment, being supportive of everything, and then maintaining contact with our clientele. And so again, we have other ways to do this. So like when I say that I'm busy, it's basically I have to just reorganize. So how do I stay busy now? Now it's making contact with you guys through social media, and then keeping our clients educated while they're gone. We have to maintain FaceTime. We want to maintain the relationship. And so that should be your goal right now. Whether you have the online business up and running and being effective, you still have that essential element is to maintain contact with your clients. And so you either do something to entertain them or you do something to inform them on a regular basis, to let them know that you're still there, you're still supporting them.
I love it. I love it. So talk to us a little bit about the online assessment process, because I know a lot of people will say, oh, there's no way you can do that. You can't put your hands on somebody. But that's also what we said about online training 8-10 years ago. And that has evolved quite a bit since then. So I would love to hear how you're doing that and how you kind of make that work in your environment. Because it's definitely different than training, right? Like, especially because such a big piece of your intervention process is assessing somebody, putting your hands on them, moving their joints around. So how are you doing that right now?
Are you asking me specifically?
Yes.
Oh, okay. There's a lot of people on the call. I didn't know.
No, I'm only asking you.
So here's where 30 years of experience comes into play. So the model, and of course, obviously Mike and a few of you who I've had direct contact with are familiar with the model that I use. And because of the evolution of that model, I have an understanding of what their movement will represent. And so I can use anything as far as an activity or a test that will provide me guidance. Is it as good as being present? Of course not. But if we understand the model that produces movement, then we can understand a little bit more about what they are doing to execute a specific movement. And so then that provides me an element of guidance. This is something that you're already doing, though. I want everybody to understand this, that you already have a representative model. You don't use mine. In fact, you probably can't even use mine because you'd have to evolve your own anyway, because your perceptions are not my perceptions. Your experience is not my experience. So don't devalue what you already know. Don't devalue what you're already doing, because it is very, very powerful. Just like you would evaluate someone's performance in the gym, if you were present, you're going to do the exact same thing in the online environment, because you have a visual representation of what your client is capable of doing and what they're executing. Then it's just a matter of refinement. So you don't even have to understand the same things that I understand, and you can still be effective. You just have to recognize the fact that you've got this representation in your head. You just need to move your client closer and closer and closer to whatever you perceive as the ideal. There's not a right or a wrong. There is just the way that you perceive things, the way they understand you, and then it's just a matter of coaching from this perspective. And so I think that one of the benefits of what's going to happen with all of this is that the people that are pursuing this are going to become much better coaches because of the environment that you're forced to do this in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, be honest, I have never done a Zoom training session until about 2 weeks ago. And I did my first one, and it's a little awkward at first, you know, trying to figure that environment out. But at the end of the day, like, people want coaching. And I think you take away or you lose access to one type of cue, right? Like, you might lose a tactile cue. If you're a trainer, you can't put your hands on somebody, but it just forces you to adapt, right? And you get better. Like, it's like anything else. Like, the first time you coach somebody, you probably weren't very good. Just like the first time you go on a Zoom session, it probably won't be very good. It's okay. The more you do it, the more reps you get, the better you'll get in that environment. So it's just one of those things. I feel like the more you do it and the more you practice it, the better you're going to be.
No question.
You know, something else that I was thinking about too, and I think something that will benefit all of us on this call, because we're all in a similar boat to varying degrees. One thing I think that you're going to see is an evolving of just our model in general with regards to how we're training people. So for a long, long time, it's always been either you're an online person or you're an offline person. And there's been very few people, I think, that have crossed over successfully. And I think one of the things that you guys will see as this goes on is you're going to have to adapt how you do things, and you're going to find a way to create a more robust business model, because it's thrown a big wrench in all of our plans, right? If you own a brick and mortar business, If you train people offline and you've been shut down for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, however long it ends up being, you're going to figure out, okay, maybe I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket anymore. So I think that's what's going to be interesting as an industry, is to see how we shift and how we evolve going forward, because we can't continue to do things as they've been done in the past. I think it's going to break the model in a lot of instances. And I think you're going to see a lot of creativity from coaches and trainers going forward as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I think a lot of people get weeded out.
I didn't want to say it, but I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Like, I think the person
who's the better coach, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, number one, there's a value proposition, right? So people are going to be a little bit stingier with their dollars. Like, the economy, it's going to take a little bit. So you're probably going to lose some people. The trainer that probably has 2 clients probably isn't going to be training people very long, or the business that wasn't doing very well probably isn't going to open back up. So I think what's going to be interesting is, as you continue to grow and evolve yourself as coaches, I think the cream will continue to rise up, and it's going to be really flush with a lot of opportunities, because a lot of like the lower level competitors that are out there probably aren't going to make it through this.
Right. There's only 2 reasons that you ever innovate. One is to stick it to the status quo and to show people what's really possible. And the other one is with a sense of urgency. And that's what we're faced with. So while everybody's probably feeling the stress of the change, you actually said the right word, is that it's opportunity. This is an opportunity for you to get better, for you to find another way, for you to evolve another revenue stream, which is incredibly powerful. Because at some point in time, we all need to make changes to how we do things. You know, everything gets comfortable for a while. You know, we've been open for 11 years. And we've never been faced with anything like this. And I know nobody has, but point being is, we've had to literally change the direction as to how we do things. Yeah. And so this is what we're trying to help you guys do, is encourage you to look at this as the opportunity. I know it's horrible. I know it's stressful. I know it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but we're going through this just like you are. We're just finding new ways, different ways, and probably better ways for us to execute.
Yeah. And it's like, once you get through the initial just frustration of, you know, going through this and being kind of locked down and not having control, after a while, I think there is that element of not just urgency, but also a little bit of like, stick it to the man. Like, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work and to make my business better as a result of this. So, I mean, I think all of you on this call are probably, you know, once you get through that initial kind of shock, awe, frustration, now you're probably all in that phase of, okay, how can I turn this and how can I use this as an advantage? That's the same thing I'm pitching to my athletes, you know, all of them. It's like, hey, look, how many guys are sitting at home literally playing Xbox all day? Versus, you know, you could be doing at-home workouts. You can be getting shots up in your driveway. Like, it's not the sexiest thing on the planet, but continuing to find ways to progress and evolve yourself during this period, I think, is incredibly valuable. So, Bill, let's talk for a few minutes about what we are planning with the new IFAST University, because I know we've gotten some questions about that. I know there's definitely a lot of interest in that. And then we can take maybe the last 25, 30 minutes to open things up and just talk about anything that our listeners would like to talk about. So why don't you talk about, let's start with this. Talk to us about your thoughts just on mentorship.
Yeah.
Then I will talk about why I want to open IFAST U back up. Okay.
Yeah. So if you guys have ever heard me talk about anything, I tend to do things out of frustration, right? I try to solve a problem. And one of the problems with the way that the educational system in general, but in our profession as well, has become formulaic. So here's what you do. You go to a course. It's a 2-day course. So it's 8 hours a day for 2 days. They hand you a manual and they say, here's the cookbook. And then you try to work with the cookbook as much as you can. You try to integrate as much as you can, but then there's no follow-up. And so what happens is this falls short. And I made a tweet, I don't know how long ago it was, about plumbing. So plumbers, so if you want to be a journeyman plumber, you have to go through a 7-year apprenticeship, 1,500 hours of continuing education. I can't even imagine the level of knowledge and awareness that you would have to go through to be 7 years as an apprentice first, then you get to be a real plumber. In our industry, I don't even know how many days does it take for you to go online, take a test, and then be granted some element of certification. I would imagine that the turnaround is just ridiculous now, right? You could probably do it in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
And then, but again, so the level of qualification does matter. It's not a matter of whether you like working out or you've worked out for a long time or you consider yourself knowledgeable. What we want to do is we want to develop practitioners. And to do that, there has to be an ongoing system of education. And that includes a capturing of experience and a growth of knowledge beyond the 2-day course concept, beyond just throwing up online content. What we want to do is we want to develop coaches and practitioners to a much higher level. Our industry, this industry, if we can look at this as a total industry of human performance. So we've got the fitness people, we've got rehab people in the room. But I'm going to pick on the fitness side because it's a little bit easier. That side of the industry suffers from a ridiculous level of attrition. There's a constant influx of people that think they can do what we do. And then months to years later, maybe they give it a good college try and then they're out and they're doing something else. Or it's considered a part-time business. It's like, yeah, I like to work out. I look good in a tank top. I took my certification and now I get to be paid a high dollar amount to work with somebody. So they're taking someone's health into their hands, right? And with a qualification of maybe a 30-day certification beyond what they've accumulated by reading somebody's blog fodder that provides them their level of education. And that's who is represented in our industry. And I think that we can be 1,000 times better. And so that's the goal with IFAST U. I think it's going to be uncomfortable for people. I think we're going to weed a bunch of people out. I think a lot of people are going to join thinking that it's going to be like everything else. I want to challenge you. And so if you don't want to challenge, get off the call right now. Just checking.
We're still at 76. Nobody's dropped yet.
But in all seriousness, I want this to be challenging. I want you to struggle a little bit. And so that's the intent. It's not just throwing up stuff and saying, oh, wow, that's really interesting and really cool. I want to challenge you people. I want to bring in people that really, really want to be great practitioners and work and do the work. And so that's what we're going to try to do with IFAST U. Like I said, it's not, this is going to be beyond the basics. This is going to be practical, hands-on execution kind of stuff. This is about making you a better practitioner. And it's the closest thing that we can do to having you in the room. That's the goal.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason we're so excited about it is, we've had IFAST U in the past. Obviously, you and I have done events in the past, but I always get feedback that we want more Mike and Bill. We want Mike and Bill working together. So I think there's a couple pieces that are really unique to what we do. Like I hear people talk all the time about finding this continuum between rehab and therapy and training. Like that's what we do, right? So if you want to understand that continuum, that gray area, that's what we bring to the table because that's what we do every day, from evaluating a post ACL client into getting them back on the court or the pitch or whatever it is. So I'm excited about that because I know just looking through the people on this call, there's not a lot of, oh yeah, I just work with high-level athletes that have never been injured, or I just deal with therapy. Like all of us that work in the real world work with people that are somewhere on this continuum. So I think that's what's going to be fun about this. The other thing that I like about it too is I think sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed with either you're just doing like Q&A calls all the time, or you're just getting dumped with content. And I think that's one of the issues that you see a lot of times, and this is the feedback that I've gotten in the past, was some people would literally tell me, like the old IFAST U, they're like, it's too much content, which you would never think, right? You would never think, oh my gosh, you can give somebody too much content. But if you're getting like 7 or 8 really good pieces of content every month, you feel like you can't consume it all, and therefore you stop. So I think that's why with us, we've kind of got this formula that we're going to go on where we each create a unique piece of content every month that's just for IFAST U. We're each going to do a Q&A call every month. We're going to have the Facebook page. So you're going to get elements of, this is what you need to know. This is what you need to learn. Coupled with, hey, let's have the interaction. Let's have that dialogue, because that's so valuable in the mentorship process. And, you know, not to speak for you, Bill, but like one of the issues when we started talking about this, when we were going back and forth, was like, how do we figure out who's right for this? And how do we make sure we've got the right people in the mix? And I think ultimately there will be a time period where it's like trying to figure out, okay, this is who this is for. This is who this is not for. But I think there's a certain sweet spot where we want to get everybody to, right? And if you're not there initially, I'm okay with that, right? Like not everybody is going to be where Bill or I want you immediately. It's about the intent, right? And it's about focusing your energy and your efforts to get to that point. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah. So let me put this upon you all that are on this call, because I'm sure the reason that you're here is that you're motivated and you want to get better. It is imperative that you take responsibility for your education. And Mike and I are willing to do pretty much whatever it takes to get you there, to help you get there to the best of our abilities. But if we don't get feedback from you, if we don't get questions from you, if there's no interaction, then again, you're not going to see the benefits of this, because a mentorship is an interaction, and that's what we're going to try to do. And we're minimizing the scale here because there's only so many people that are even allowed on this call. And so the thing I want you to always remember is that if you are dissatisfied, it's because you're not interacting enough. You're not providing us a lead as to what your needs are, because we are all at different levels. We have all different perspectives, right? That doesn't make them useful or useless. It just means that we're different. We're all in different places. We all can't be at the same place, but if you provide us the information, if you provide us the questions, we can all make progress, and that's the goal.
See, and I think, just think about the clients you struggled the most with in the gym, right? They're the ones where you're giving your best effort, you're working hard. How was that set? Okay. What'd you feel? You know, like if they give you no feedback, those are the hardest people to train. So like, that's one thing we're going to constantly be asking for is like, okay, what are you struggling with? What do you need help with? Because that's how that's a true mentorship process, is where there's this kind of dance back and forth between, this is what you're struggling with, this is how we can help you. This is what you're struggling with now, this is how we can help you. And I think that's how every great mentorship process works. It's this back and forth dialogue. And sometimes it's hard, it takes time. I mean, I know it's a very buzzword now in our industry, but that ability to be vulnerable and ask the questions, that can be hard for a lot of people. But if you're willing to ask questions, there are no dumb questions. But, you know, like we want questions, we need feedback, and that's how we can cultivate this and make it the best possible process for you.
Awesome.
So this has gone pretty well so far.
Let's do questions.
Yes. So here's what I would love for you to do. I'm not going to unmute people because I feel like that would be a disaster. And I've seen 20 plus kindergartners on a Zoom call in the last month. And let me tell you, it doesn't go very well. So here, what I'd love for you to do, down at the bottom, there is a chat function. And my boy, Coach Flex Montego, has already asked something. So Bill, I will pose this one to you. If you have questions, put it in chat. We'll answer as many as we can in the next 25, 30 minutes. So Bill, Coach Flex would like to know, what kind of assessments are you doing online?
I will do whatever I need to do, which is a really crappy answer. but
But also a very real answer.
well, but it is a real answer, because after 30 years of experience and understanding, what I do is going to be radically different. So if I tell you what I do, it would not be as meaningful. So if I say I do a low propulsion test, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you, because it's a test that I evolved myself. My question would be, what are you finding that is effective, that leads you towards what your intended outcome is? That's where you want to focus your efforts, right? So it doesn't matter what I think. What you need to do is you need to say, I want to use this test. And I would say, why is that test useful for you? Because if I do a toe touch test and you do a toe touch test, what are you looking at that I'm not looking at? So again, I throw it back to you. It's like, what activities, what tests are you finding effective that can lead you towards what your intended goal is? Because again, it's like, again, we could lay out, it's like, I do this test, this test, this test, this test, but my interpretation of those tests are going to be different than yours, right? That's why you need to understand, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's what IFAST U is going to be about. It's going to be like, okay, here's literally what we do. Here's my interpretation of the test. Here's how you can use that, right? For this moment in time right now, what you need to do is you need to just grasp and have confidence in the things that you're doing right now, and say, this is what I'm finding effective. This is why I think it's effective. And this is what my intended outcome is. And this is where I was successful. We all work on probabilities. I never know what the outcome's going to be. I do a test, I do an intervention, and then I retest. You use the same process. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing as the assessment. What matters to you is, what is your process? How are you determining whether you are being successful or not? So pick any test that you want, create an intervention that supports your intention, execute, and then retest. Now you know whether you're being effective. So I don't have to tell you what interpretation of your test need to be right now. We'll evolve that through IFAST U. That's not a problem. For this moment in time, though, you need to establish an effective process, right? Because it doesn't matter what test you're using. What matters is whether you're being effective.
This is perfect. Okay, Bill, so there's a bunch of questions. I'm going to kind of direct some of these towards you that will be best.
Okay, I'm ready.
What means or mediums are you using to work with people? Zoom?
Zoom.
Like Zoom exclusively?
I did a Skype call 2 weeks ago. It was horrible.
Okay.
Horrible.
Really?
The visual interface was, I've done Skype before, but I hate it. I hate it. It's unclear. I mean, I know that you guys are having some trouble with some video and audio here, but Zoom in general has been very successful. Skype is horrible. I don't like it. I just don't like it. So I stick with Zoom.
Gotcha.
And I can record it much easier, and I get the recordings much faster.
Well, iPhone has just announced to me that we are collabing this summer. We're going 2-a-days each day, and I can't post the before and after pictures. So iPhone, I don't know what we're collabing on, but I'm excited. So make sure you let me know more about that. Okay, Bill, this one is definitely for you. For online sessions, how would you cue breathing for a narrow ISA?
How would I do it?
How would you cue breathing for a narrow ISA? Yep.
So in general, so the problem that you run into with a narrow infrasternal angle is that they use an external muscular strategy for exhalation. So diaphragm position requires that they do so. Because you use an external oblique, which is typically not an exhalation muscle, the pressure inside the thorax ramps up too quickly and you actually trap air. So when you teach somebody to exhale that has a narrow ISA, it should be a relaxed mouth, slow, extensive exhalation versus a high pressure type of strategy. Because if you use a high pressure strategy, all you do is reinforce the compensatory element, right? So you've got to teach them to exhale a little bit more slowly. But again, a little bit more of a relaxed exhale.
Perfect. All right. This next one I think is for you as well. This one comes from my boy, Corey Mahan, former IFAST intern extraordinaire. Corey wants to know, what assessment do you use to determine if someone is compressed in the upper upper dorsal rostral region versus compressed in the lower dorsal rostral region.
Okay.
Not an easy one to get out.
Yeah. So lungs fill from the bottom up like a glass of water because of gravity. So the strategy will essentially be learned. And so no matter what position you put them in, you can determine this. You have to look at what constitutes an external rotation measure of the shoulder, which would be traditional external rotations, horizontal abduction, and flexion overhead, true flexion overhead. So I got a YouTube video up there on how to measure that. And so basically you're looking at this cascade that goes upward. So as you would use almost like a gradient measurement of flexion, the higher you go in the dorsal rostral space, as far as the limitation goes, the higher the limitation is more overhead. So lower dorsal rostral would be more of a horizontal limitation. Upper dorsal rostral would be more of an overhead limitation.
Boom. Love it. All right. Ryan Hoover once said he's completing up complete coach cert. Awesome. Love hearing about that. Wants to know more about resets. How do you know someone needs them? Just because they have a postural issue. And he also wants to know about recommended resources. So here is what I would say. If somebody is lacking movement in a specific area where you want it, right? So it could be the hips, the shoulders, wherever, chances are they are lacking movement variability. They're lacking the ability to move air into certain spaces, and they would benefit from resets. So, unless you have some client that literally has all their range of motion, they move perfectly, there's probably a chance that you can do something with a reset to improve their movement. Now, that's not to say it needs to be a basic low-level breathing exercise. A lot of times you can do bigger bang stuff. And in fact, sometimes that's more valuable. As far as resources go, I would highly recommend, if you're not already following Bill on the gram and on YouTube, he's putting out all kinds of stuff about different tests you can use, interventions that you can use, and he's dropping stuff like every single day. So if you're not following him, I would highly recommend doing that. Thomas would like to know, and I'll just give this one to you, Bill, because this is your kind of arena. How would you go about decreasing an anterior pelvic orientation?
Okay, so an orientation is not a relative position change inside the pelvis. It's the pelvis moving as a single unit. So you have a compressive strategy. So the muscles that surround the pelvis are locking the ilia and the sacrum together as a single unit, and the whole pelvis is moving through space. So the first thing you have to do is reorient that. And so in most cases, it's going to be something that's occurring above the level of the pelvis that is driving that show. So the center of gravity is pushed forward. So what you have to do is you have to create a situation that reorients the center of gravity so it goes backwards, and then that's going to bring the whole pelvis back as a unit. Then you can start to reestablish the relative motions. So under most circumstances, you're going to have to drive something that expands posteriorly. So if I would have, let's say, a spine that is pushed forward above the level of the pelvis, which means I would probably compress the lower posterior rib cage, I have to create expansion in that lower aspect of the posterior rib cage first. You can do it with air, you can do it with muscle activity. So something as simple, and again, the old school stuff, I call it old school because I've been around for 30 years. The old school stuff, like what we used to do a ton of glute bridging, single leg glute bridges, a bunch of hip extension kind of stuff. You could, if you were a power lifter, don't tell anybody I said this out loud. You could even use the reverse hyper, and you would capture the same thing if you do it the right way. So there's a lot of ways, there's many roads that lead to Rome, but the point being is you have to create an active strategy that moves the center of gravity backwards, because these people are forwards. They're even forward on their toes. So they will have limited dorsiflexion. They will have knee extension related issues. And so again, you have to look at this from, how do I move things backwards?
Love it. Love it. Martin Chewick, I would love to answer your question, but he asked to both Bill and Mike, what are your training principles? I'm going to have to just say I cannot answer that in any short period of time, but go ahead.
I can do one.
Do it.
Always position your client where they are most successful.
Ooh, love it.
Step one, under every circumstance.
Yep.
under every circumstance. And so that's a progression or regression if you look at posturing and positioning, right?
Yep.
And so that's where you have to start. Because the minute you put them in a position where they are no longer successful, all you get is frustration, right? Let them know that they are being successful. And it's up to you to determine what that position is.
Love it. Okay, Bill, I'm definitely giving you this one. It is from Michelle. Best resources to start for a new grad physical therapist. She says she's been out of the clinic for 10 weeks. She wants to learn the best strategies to manage and treat neck, specifically cervical radiac. I don't think.
Radiculopathy?
Sure.
I didn't
It's
see it.
not the whole word. It's just ridic. So
Yeah,
I'm
probably radiculopathy.
Yeah.
So don't worry about the radiculopathy. You can't do anything about it. Okay.
Yep.
So what the goal is to restore the relative motions within the cervical spine. So under most cases, especially when you have a restriction in motion, you have segments that are moving together. So if you think about the foramen where the nerve exits the cervical spine, if I compress that area, okay, all I'll get is some form of compressive syndrome, right? So it could be anything from numbness and tingling to pain. If I have an inflammatory situation, nothing you're going to do about that. Send them to the doc. In most cases, with the radiculopathy, in most cases, you have a cervical spine that is pushed forward, which means that we're back to the previous question about the anterior orientation. You also have a lumbar spine that is pushed forward. Start there. Get the entire axial skeleton to move backwards and get posterior expansion. Posterior expansion increases the foraminal space and it restores rotation. And so if it's just position that's causing the nerve root irritation, now you're going to be very, very successful. But keep in mind that nerves are funny and they don't change right away. So you might capture position, you might capture the ranges of motion, which would be determined if you're looking at cervical spine, you better have full shoulder flexion on the affected side. If you don't, then you don't have foraminal expansion. So you got to move everything back, you restore normal rotations, and then you got to let that nerve recover if that's the case, if you do have an inflammatory situation.
Love it. Allison Tanner, also another amazing IFAST intern, wants all of you to know that Zoom also has HIPAA compliant accounts if you're a practitioner. So that's kind of a big deal. This will actually go very well with the question you were just answering, Bill. So what interventions do you implement for someone who cannot expand in the upper thorax? And I guess that's maybe, upper thorax could be anterior or posterior.
Right. So it kind of matters.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we could differentiate between the two major archetypes, would it be the wide ISAs and the narrow ISAs?
Yep.
Right. So with a narrow ISA, you can flip them upside down. And when I say that, it's not like straight upside down. It's like butt higher than shoulders kind of a thing. So that would be a little bit of inversion. You can do that in prone. So that could be all fours. That could be knees elevated and resting on elbows. It's some form of inversion. And the narrow would be face down. Your wide will be face up and then trying to bias to one side or the other. Those would be your first two strategies when you're looking at trying to get AP expansion.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. V. Poley, I'm not sure of the actual name, asks, do you educate the client to keep them motivated and interested if the process takes time and results or don't come quickly? I will take this to start. And if you want to chime in, Bill, feel free. I think absolutely. I am always trying to educate my clients, regardless of their goals, as to the process, as to why we're doing certain things. I think a better understanding leads to better buy-in, which will ultimately lead to better outcomes. So a lot of the stuff that we do is counterintuitive at IFAST. If you're there for fat loss, we're not going to just smash you on your first day in the gym. If it's a professional athlete and it's my first time working you out, I'm not trying to just slay you and show you how awesome I am in the gym and how sore I can make you. I'm going to take you through probably a pretty basic general workout to get an understanding of how you move, what we need to continue to work on. I'm going to educate you as to, what we found in the assessment, how the assessment ties into the training, how we're going to connect all those dots to ultimately make you a better athlete. So I think Absolutely. I think if you're not educating your clients, your athletes, your patients, you're doing them a disservice, because look, the reason you're on this call is because you're like an absolute savage when it comes to learning more and you want to get better outcomes. So you're giving up a competitive advantage if you're not, because Jim Bro down the street doesn't understand why he's doing stuff. He doesn't have a rationale. It's just, this is what I do with every client. So this is why we do this, versus you have a system, you have a thought process. So it behooves you to explain that to your clients, your athletes, your patients, whoever you're working with, so that they have a better understanding and so that they'll ultimately buy in and trust you more. Bill, do you want to say anything on that? Or
Yeah, so when you're providing education, the thing you want to do is always have the client's understanding in mind. So we use the term that is very popular of meeting them at their story. So when you're doing an initial intake with a patient, or you're doing that first meeting with a new client in the gym, you need to establish rapport. You need to get a sense of what their level of understanding is, so you can meet them there and then bring them towards where you want them to go. The thing that you don't ever want to do is spend time demonstrating how intelligent you are, because that's not important to the client. They are there for selfish reasons. While they like you and they might want to hear what you have to say, always keep in mind that you're there for them and for their level of understanding. If you can create an understanding with their analogy, so they're going to offer up terminology and things that they've read on the internet because they want to be educated and they want to speak with some measure of intelligence in the gym. But you really have to meet them at their story and start there when you're trying to educate them. Once they have a better understanding, then that's how you get the buy-in, and then you demonstrate success, and then they're your friend for life.
love it. Bill, this next one is definitely for you. What interventions would you use for someone who has overstretched ligaments in their shoulder after testing shoulder flexion? And he comments that testing with the thumb in the armpit and the glenohumeral head pops in.
So you're going to have to demonstrate to me that that's actually some form of laxity first and foremost, rather than a position, because my perspective on that has evolved probably in the last few years as to what is representative of a true laxity. There are some cases where there may be some, but they are fewer and far between than what I had perceived in the past. And so again, this is a like I said, an evolved opinion about that. In most cases, again, without some clear-cut genetically predisposed severity of diagnosis, I don't think I would make any kind of leap under those circumstances, because there are other situations, especially when you're talking about shoulders and the way that it can be positioned, where you can actually create a position where the constraints are much less. And you can do this in the hip too. And you can have hip excursions in a normal hip. So a normal hip excursion would be about 100 degrees of internal and external rotation combined. You can have a hip that has about 130 degrees of rotation just by changing its orientation. That is not laxity. Same thing going on in the shoulder in most cases. The thing that you have to do is you have to try to recapture the positions first. The rules don't change, right? You just have to have a representation. You have to have a model that provides you the greatest measure of success based on your intentions. That might take time. And I'll tell you what, I'm okay with you calling it laxity, and then you got to give me an intervention that's going to address that anyway, because if it is laxity, if it was truly laxity, you can't change that anyway.
Love it. Okay, this next one comes from Chase Gilmore. Chase, good to hear from you, buddy.
Never heard of him, sorry.
So I'm going to answer this, and then I'd like to hear your answer as well. Okay, Bill? So Chase wants to know, is there any required experiential or education prerequisites for IFAST U? And then he wants to know about like the membership fee and the monthly cost. So let's start with that first question. And I'm going to answer your question with sort of a story, sort of anecdotes. So one of my favorite all-time seminar attendees was somebody I met in like 2009, 2010. I was doing like this tour of Australia. And one of the guys comes to lunch with us. And this is the most curious guy I've probably ever met. And I'm just like, dude, like you have not stopped asking me questions all day. Like I love you and I love the questions, but like, what's going on? And, you know, so we go back and forth. And I'm like, what gym do you train at? He's like, I'm not a trainer. I'm like, what? He's like, no, I sell blackberries for a living. But this guy was asking me all of like these amazing questions. And so that always stuck out in my mind. And Bill can attest to this. I mean, think about the people that we've hired at IFAST. Zach Moore, Master of Economics. Jay Chung, I think philosophy major, master in music, like viola maestro. Like we have a hodgepodge of people. And I like it that way. I like having all these people because by the time they get to us, they're ready. So Chase, to answer your question in a really roundabout way, there's no like experiential or education prerequisites. I would say the biggest prerequisite is a hunger and a thirst for learning, for wanting to know more about why we write programs the way that we do, why do we move the way that we do. Is there better strategies for how we do all these things? So I think that's the most important piece. Now, second, this is going to be a lot of time on Bill and I's part. And I do like private consulting that's $400 a month. I'm also sensitive to the fact that nobody's going to spend, or very few people want to spend $400 a month for a private mentorship right now. So that's why we have not finalized price, but it will be under $100 per month. So coming out of this, we realize, look, everybody's looking to save dollars. I'm looking to save dollars, right? Because I've lost people in all of this, and we're going to lose gym members on the back end of this as well. But we want it to be something that is a smart investment on your guys' part, and that is going to help you really, move your career forward, right? We're going to be doing stuff every week to create great content, to mentor you guys. And again, whether it's the Q&A calls, the Facebook, we're going to put a lot of time and energy into this. So we think it's going to be a really good value, and it's also going to be just a great price point based on the value that you're getting from the content. So Bill, do you want to say anything to that, or?
No. You pretty much covered it. It's like,
Okay.
and I have this sinking suspicion that we will over deliver. So
Yeah,
you're not.
I really think that will be the case.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, just so you know, I'm looking at the queue. There's like 30 messages, and there's 9 minutes and 17% on my on my laptop. So
Let's do what we can.
many of these as we can, but if we don't get to yours, I sincerely apologize. Okay, Gary Al, I think it's his last name, Al, also a complete coach person. Process question. He says he's learning so much from us. When you're trying a new idea or principle, what are your standards for figuring out if it's valuable or not? Or more specifically, time constraints. How much time do you give to trust the process before deviating or messing with it?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
So the first part's really easy. What happened?
Yes.
Right?
Get the desired outcome, yes or no, right?
Right. So here's the thing that you have to understand about processes. Processes have to be adaptable because they're based on the outcome, right? So sometimes you just do something.
Yep.
And then you determine, okay, what happened? It was either good, it was bad, or nothing. So meatloaf question, right? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So you get rid of the first 2 and you say, well, what did I do well? Okay, so maybe it's me having to go back and reevaluate. This happens to me all the time. I fail every day, almost every session. At some point in time, there will be a failure. Every once in a while, you get some of those golden days where everything goes really, really well, and you think you're a god, and then the next day you're banging your head on the steering wheel of your Jeep when you're driving home because you were just miserable because you failed so much. But the point being is, it's like you have to separate the good and the bad from the outcomes because it's just an outcome. So you always have a process that says, okay, what did I do well? What did I not do well? What information did I miss? What could I have done differently that would have achieved the same goal? So you ask the same questions. So that's where the process comes in. That's why I don't care what tests you do right now. It doesn't matter. It's like, what happens with your process? So the process evolves, okay? It will always change, but that's part of it. And that's the thing you have to recognize. Like there are very few absolute rights and very few absolute wrongs. We live and behave and work in gray. We play probabilities. We're playing poker, not chess.
Yep. Love it. Okay. Bill, let's do this. 7 minutes. Let's rapid fire, like lightning round, as many of these as we can.
All right, go.
All right. So Coach Flex wants to know strategies for grooving nutation, counter nutation. So I'm going to give you a couple that I like, and I'm going to go with the counter nutation piece. I love the modified child's pose. I think that really drives some air into that lower back. Cat camel, the rocking and rolling stuff that Bill has talked about. I love all those things for kind of driving some of that. Okay, my favorite. Huh?
Do I get nutation?
Yeah, you can take nutation.
Can I do it?
Yes, go.
Okay, deadlift. Done.
Yes, that'll drive some nutation. Exhibit A right here.
Yeah. Any hinging motion. Back
Love
squats. Go crazy.
Love it.
Yep.
Okay, my 10th favorite client, Zepp, aka Zeppy, wants to know, do athletes need breathing techniques? He says Jordan didn't do them. Okay, so yes, a lot of athletes need breathing techniques, some for different reasons than others, and I never look at the extreme outlier as representative of what the masses need. Michael Jordan is infamous for doing really stupid things like staying out till 6, 7 in the morning gambling and then sleeping for 3 hours and then dropping 40 or 50 on the Knicks. So I'm not going to look at him as my example as to what an athlete needs.
Some people are born with those things already and they don't need them. So keep that in mind.
Great stuff.
Some people don't need strength training. Don't tell anybody I said that, but that's true.
Right. I think we've got a couple ourselves. Okay, Eric Bergman wants to know, and Bill, this is to you. What peripheral measures are used to determine if there is anterior compression of the thorax?
Loss of internal rotations, period.
Perfect. Question for Bill. What interventions do you use for someone who doesn't use their left eye?
Their left what?
Their left eye.
Like they're blind in their left eye?
I don't know. Like Neil Hallinan. I don't know who Neil Hallinan is.
Neil, give me a clarification on that. Are we talking about somebody that's missing an eye? Because I've had that.
I don't know. R. Sandman. If you get back in here down at the bottom, let us know more info. Okay. This is from iPhone. How often do you work ankle mobility, T-spine rotation, open book, wall slide, single leg, hip lift, etc.?
Every day.
Love it.
Just not the way you do it.
Ooh, I like it.
I don't call any of that what you call it. And that's okay. Right? But I do it every day.
Yep. Okay. Miller is asking, so you talked about the propensity we have for loading on the right and propulsing off the left side in complete coach with some cueing and half kneeling. How do you determine if someone is an exception to that rule? First off, there's very few exceptions to that rule as far as like a base compensation. What you will see is varying levels of compensation that go beyond that. So what I would say is you're going to have to look at what does their hip and pelvis look like? What do they look like in other movements? So half kneeling isn't the only area that I'm going to coach or cue that in. So if that's an issue, that's going to change everything about how I coach them, from a split squat to a single leg squat, to a step up, to a squat pattern, the squat variation I choose. So there's a lot of pieces to that. And it would take a little bit more information for me to know, like, what compensations am I seeing to tell you how I would fix it. Michelle Landis came on and she said, thank you, Bill. Much appreciated. So just Bill, not me. I'm not. For Mike, ooh, this one is good. For Mike, how was the bacon wrap filet? The bacon wrap filet was amazing. Thank you very much. I'm really getting the hang of the Kamado Joe, so I'm excited about that. Also, do you agree with the phrase weight room training is gait training? Based on that, probably not, unless we're talking about impairing gait, because I feel like that's what most weight training probably does. John Glenn says, thank you, Mike and Bill. Look forward to learning more. Thanks, JR. Miller, how do you explain posterior thoracic expansion to someone who has been taught to squeeze shoulders back and down? Bill, let's finish on this one, because I think this is such an important question. And you hear this all the time still, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've just got to pin my shoulder blades back and down, and then my shoulders are like bulletproof for life.
Yeah.
So explain that.
Well, your shoulder blades could be friends, but they should never touch, right?
Yes.
It should be virtually impossible to touch them together. There should be something in between at all times, right? So this is a reach down and forward and take a breath in kind of a thing, right? That's how you create space there.
Yep.
Right? And it's that simple.
Yep.
Let's not overcomplicate the simple, right? because the whole premise behind the whole shoulders down and back has been grossly misrepresented and misunderstood. And once again, this is one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing, is we're going to help you to understand why these things exist and why they may be misapplied.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to give you the process, and we'll give you the understanding of the principles, and then we'll show you how to execute the plans.
Love it. I'm going to just comment on one more. So Gary, Al wants to know, how do you become more concise? And I think this is something that all coaches and trainers can work on, especially when you're young. So much of what you do when you're young is just stream of consciousness, right? And you're trying to like formulate sentences because you don't have this clear understanding of what is most important. So I would say communication outside of coaching, learning to be a better communicator is arguably one of the most important things you can do as a human being. And it doesn't matter whether it's writing, audio, like speaking, whether it's communicating on video. This is a skill in communication that you can use forever. So I'd say if you want to become a better communicator, figure out which medium is most important and spend a lot of time there. If it's writing, write a lot. If it's speaking, speak a lot. If it's creating videos, shoot a lot of videos. Make a lot of mistakes. I mean, that's what I've done. And you guys don't see all the outtakes, and it might look really pretty when it's all done, but trust me, Paul Rutan, Bill, the people that have been around, there's a lot of outtakes to go with the things that make it look pretty clean and tight on the end. So, all right, guys, truly appreciate all of you coming on. I mean, I think we had 79 people, and not bad for announcing this like 8 hours ago. We're still at 65. So truly, truly appreciate all of you for coming on here. As we get the new IFAST U rolling, we'll make sure we put links up. But in the meantime, make sure you're following both Bill and I, whether it's YouTube, Instagram. We're putting a ton of content out there. And we're just big believers that we're all kind of in this together. So we are going to give very judiciously of our time right now to help you become better coaches. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And you'll be able to watch a live replay of this later today. We'll have it up on our respective pages. So thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you.